This is Have You Met? My guest today is a former Air Force test pilot, NASA astronaut, shuttle pilot, and space station commander. He's flown over 5,000 hours in over 40 different aircraft and has spent over 200 days in space. He's a podcaster, speaker, filmmaker, and author. His latest book is titled How to Astronaut, An Insider's Guide to Leaving Planet Earth. He's had some fascinating guests on his own podcast, including UFO community heavyweights Luis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon. It's refreshing to see this guest branching out and talking openly about unidentified aerial phenomenon. We talk about his time in our skies and in space, and of course, his thoughts on UFOs. Have you met Terry Virts? So, Terry, tell me when you first flew a plane.
My first flight was as a kid. I remember getting on Delta Airlines going down to Disney World. We were going to Disney World on a family vacation. And then I remember I was probably 8 years old or something. My dad got me a ride in a biplane, like at the county fair. And I was terrified I was going to fall out. I asked him not to go upside down because I was afraid I'd fall out of the airplane. But I fell in love immediately. I mean, I hardly ever flew. I took a few airplane vacations as kids, but not very often. And it wasn't really until I got to the Air Force Academy, I started flying gliders there. They had a glider program for cadets, and I got to solo after a few flights. Jeshua Metcalf was my instructor. I still remember her. And I kind of fell in love with that. So they had a program where I could be an instructor. So I did lots and lots of glider flying in college at the Air Force Academy. And yeah.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Wow. And so what about your first time flying a plane, like as a pilot then?
So the first time that I was actually the pilot was probably my dad got me that ride. The guy probably gave me the controls for a few minutes, but it was really not until I was a sophomore at the Air Force Academy. So I was 18 years old flying gliders. That was the first time.
Okay. Flying gliders. That's cool. So you were 18. You went to France as well, somewhere around there, didn't you, to do some time in the French Air Force?
At the French Air Force Academy. So they had a exchange program. So I got to go spend a semester in southern France, which was great because it meant that I only had to spend 7 semesters at the Air Force Academy here in Colorado. And so it was good to get away. It was good to get away for a few months. And that was incredible. And I actually flew a lot there. The French were a lot more focused on flying. Ironically, the U.S. Air Force Academy, I paid money to get a private pilot's license. Like I paid for my Cessna lessons. My dad got me some flying lessons, and I did the glider flying, but there wasn't a lot of other flying I did as a cadet while I was here in Colorado. But in France, I flew all kinds of planes. I actually flew with the Patrie de France, the French Thunderbirds.
Oh, wow.
I flew, my first jet flight was in a Fuga Magister, which is this old 1940s. It's got a V tail on the back. I flew a couple different Mirages, Mirage F1, Mirage 3, Alpha Jets. And so it was pretty fun being over there because all I wanted to do was fly. Yeah. And we did a lot of that.
How different was everything? And was it all in French or did they speak English?
Oh, yeah. The cadets spoke some English, but not, if you go over there now, the French people speak English universally almost, but in the 80s, it was not like that at all. So the instruction was all in French. The flying was in French. We had to learn all this flying vocabulary. And so that was a challenge. I mean, I can speak French, but there's, there's different levels. There's a difference between flying in French and in English, but that was a lot of fun. Actually, that was a good challenge.
Yeah, cool. So you came back from that year, and then where did you go on to? Did you go on to Korea, or were you based in the US for a bit after that?
So when I graduated from the academy, I went to Williams Air Force Base in Arizona for pilot training. And then I went to Holloman for fighter training. And then I went to MacDill for F-16s in Florida. And I went to Homestead in Florida for that was my first real F-16 assignment until Hurricane Andrew came along, and that ended Homestead Air Force Base. And so it's rebuilt now, but at the time it was in bad shape. Yeah. So then I went to Georgia for a year. Then I went to Korea for a year. And then I went to Germany for 3.5 years. And then I finally made it to Edwards Air Force Base for test pilot school. So I had 11 mailing addresses in 11 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And
That's
then I
crazy.
moved, and then I moved to Texas for NASA, and I've been here for 21 years now. So I had 11 addresses in 11 years, and
Yeah.
I've been in Texas for the last 21.
Got all the moving out of your system early and settled
Yes,
down.
exactly.
What was your first time in an F-16 like? How was that? How much of a step up was it from whatever you were flying just before as well?
Well, it was unbelievable. The first F-16 I flew was a Block 30. So it was one of the early C models, which means it was very light. The new F-16s are really heavy. There's all kinds of extra equipment they put in there. So it was really light, and they had a new engine, General Electric GE, the -129 engine, F-110-129. And it was amazing. It put out almost 30,000 pounds of thrust. And the F-16, without any bombs or anything on it, probably weighed 25,000 pounds or whatever. So it had a lot more thrust than the airplane had weight. And that was my first ride in an F-16. And so it was downhill from there. But there's no airplane like an F-16. The F-22 has a lot more thrust. The F-35 is way better. I just was at an F-35 graduation a few months ago, and those guys that airplane is incredible. It's such a great airplane, but it's not an F-16. And even the F-35 pilots agreed, the F-16, there's no canopy bow. Most fighters have this big metal thing that blocks your view. The side stick and the side throttle, it's like you're wearing the airplane. It just becomes a part of your body. And I actually recognize that. In my first flying job in Homestead, we just had Mark 82s and AIM-9s. So like dumb bombs where you had to aim the bomb and manually drop it. And AIM-9s are short range dogfighting missiles. And that's all we had. And I remember thinking, man, these are the good old days, because it's all about the pilot and it's flying and it's manual. The new airplanes that, then we got laser guided bombs and we got long range radar missiles. And now they have GPS guided bombs where you just hit the button and the bomb does everything for you. Which is much better. If you're going to war, I'd much rather be in an F-35 with everything automated. Yeah. But if you're in training, that F-16 with Mark 82s and AIM-9s, that was the way to go.
That was the fun.
Those were the good old days for sure.
Yeah, nice. And you do lots of combat missions in the F-16. I think from reading your NASA bio, this was just such a cool sentence, low altitude night attack missions. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I did that in Korea. And those were the good old days. We don't do that anymore. But there was a system called Lantern. It had a radar and an infrared camera. And the radar would fly really low. You could put it at 100 feet. We flew higher than that for training. But the airplane would just fly itself through the valleys and mountains at night. And so that was a way to evade enemy surface to air missiles. And it had an infrared camera. So now that you have night vision goggles, you can look around and see everything. But then it was only this little screen in front of you on your heads up display that was all you could see. And so I remember I spent 6 months in Korea flying night. Literally, I didn't fly a day sortie for 6 months. And when I went out and flew my first day mission, I was scared. I was like, there's ground down there. I wasn't used to seeing the ground. And that was really cool. The Air Force stopped that pretty soon after I did it, but I'm glad I had a chance to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounded amazing. It caught my eye as soon as I read that. I was like, whoa, that's some real stuff.
The F-16s, they call it a multi-role fighter. It does air to air and air to ground. But I was really lucky because I got to do the basic day dogfighting stuff. I got to do laser guided bombs. We actually I wrote the tactics for the first GBU-24, this special laser guided bomb. I did the night low altitude, which is pretty rare. Not a lot of guys got to do that. And then I did this mission called Wild Weasel in Germany, which is going hunting for enemy surface to air missiles. It's a special radar receiver pod that looks for enemy radars. So I got to do that mission. So I also did nukes. In the 90s, F-16s were still doing the nuclear mission. So I got certified. Our squadron, we'd watch Dr. Strangelove after certification, and we were pretty sure we were never going to have to do it, but we took it very seriously, because that's something you don't want to make mistakes when you're doing nuclear weapons. So I was really lucky. I got to do everything that you can do in an F-16 in a pretty less than a decade career.
Yeah. Did you fly differently when you knew you had these nukes on board? Were you a little bit more careful?
you just fly by the book. You don't deviate anything. You just do exactly. Normally, I'm a very free-flowing, flexible person, and that's the way I flew too. But there's no flexibility. There's no room for judgment or decision making. When you're doing nukes, you just do exactly what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So as well, on your bio, I think this was your NASA bio, I read that you've flown more than 5,000 hours in 40 different aircraft, or more than 40 different aircraft. And I just wondered if there was any particular moments or aircraft that stood out to you as like the most memorable, or some particular experiences that you just kind of
flying stories.
Yeah.
So by far the F-16 is my favorite airplane. I think your first fighter anyway is always your favorite, but for sure the F-16 was the best. It had so much power. You could do all these different missions, and the controls, like I said, it just kind of fit you like a hand in a glove. I need all my fingers and a few toes to count the number of times I almost died flying jets. When I got to NASA, they have a T-38 program, which is the Air Force Advanced Jet Trainer. So in pilot training, Air Force students who are going to fly fighters or bombers fly in a T-38, and then NASA has a fleet of, I don't know, maybe 20 jets or something that astronauts can fly in. It's the best training we do for space flight, by the way. Even though you're not flying T-38s in space, it trains your brain to think fast and handle pressure and that kind of thing. But, when I was in Korea, I remember one night we were flying at night, and again, we didn't have night vision goggles. It was a hazy night. Murky, and there's a lot of city lights and there's a lot of stars, and because it was hazy, you couldn't tell what was what, or not a lot of city lights, just a few city lights. We were over the country, and I was doing this maneuver. The bad guy was behind me, so I was pitching back into him, looking over my shoulder, doing a 9G pull, just watching this guy, and he was putting out flares so I could tell who it was. And then all of a sudden things got really quiet, and I looked in, and I had gone to dogfight mode, which means the display doesn't show any attitude information. It only shows your gun cross. And everything was murky. And I'm like, this is really weird. It just got quiet and I can't tell what's going on. And I looked down, and I was pointed straight up on the attitude indicator. There was a circle. And so instead of pitching back like this, I had pitched back and pitched up like that accidentally. Wow. Yeah. And so luckily the F-16 flight controls can handle that, and the engine didn't flame out. If I had been in an F-4 or some old F-100 airplane, it probably would have flamed out the engine and put it into a spin, and I was fine. But I remember thinking, God, I'm glad I didn't accidentally pitch down, because I would have hit the ground. Yeah. Another one, that when you're doing that night emission, they beat it into our heads in training. You let the computer fly until you're doing the attack, and then you're flying manually. But when you're flying manually, you have to fly and pay attention. You can't look at the target. And actually, a guy had just killed himself looking at the target, and he flew the jet into the ground at Luke Air Force Base. So it was a really big deal. My very first mission in Korea, I finally got checked out. I'm going out there by myself. F-16 is a single seat, single engine jet. And I let the computer fly. I take over manually to fly the final attack phase. And the very first thing I did was look at the target, and I start slewing the targeting pod on the target for the laser guided bomb. It was absolutely what I wasn't supposed to do. And a few seconds later, I hear, we called her Bitchin' Betty. It's the female voice in the cockpit that yells at you.
Right.
She's yelling, pull up, pull up. And all of a sudden my head is between my knees as the airplane, I was about to hit a hill, and the airplane pulled up. And I was so mad at myself. I couldn't believe it. And it was like, man, I knew I wasn't supposed to do that, but I was so distracted by that targeting pod. So I could go on and on. I have a lot of, I hit a bird one time, or hit 3 birds one time in a NASA jet that exploded the left engine right while I hadn't even lifted off yet. I was going 150 knots on the runway. So I had to do that was a 3-minute flight. So it was pretty crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. On one of those stories, 9G. How does 9G feel?
It's hard to describe. So the way I describe it on launch, a rocket is about 3Gs. So I say, just lay on your back and have 2 or 3 of your friends lay on top of you. And that's the pressure that you feel. But in a fighter, you're sitting like this, right? So the G forces is from your head. The G forces from your head to your toes. So you'd have to have 8 or 9 of your buddies sit on your shoulders. That's the amount of pressure you feel. And you can watch videos in the centrifuge. As soon as you pull back, you just sink down like that, and your face does this. It's like an aging machine.
Yeah.
And it wants to pull the blood out of your head, and so you have to kind of grunt. You make your thighs and your legs, squeeze them as hard as you can, and you squeeze your stomach as hard as you can. And you can do that just sitting here, but it's not safe, because when you go, you can like pop your blood vessels in your eyes. You don't want to do this very much, but that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to push that blood back up in there. And it's hard to move your head too. If the bad guy's in front of you, that's okay. But if he's behind you, what you have to do is set your head against the seat and then pull, because you don't want to pull and then try and move your head. That's a good way to break your neck or really hurt yourself. Yeah. And there's a lot of, like, I have back problems. There's a lot of fighter pilots with either fused necks, vertebrae, or, back problems. That's a common occupational hazard.
Yeah, I bet. That sounds intense. How many more Gs can you do before you're basically on the verge of passing out? Do you think, like, not you specifically, but a human, your average fighter pilot? Yeah.
9 Gs is kind of the limit that, everybody. Now, could you go to 12? It depends on how long you do it. Because when you eject, that's like a 20 or 30 G explosion. But it's only for a tenth of a second or something. So it really is a question of how long you're going to do it for. And my kind of senior graduation project at test pilot school was this thing called A-tags. It was a new G suit. It eventually became the G suit they use in the F-22. But that thing, it was just more, a G suit is a big, it's kind of like chaps, like the cowboys wear. And it inflates and it squeezes your legs. And so it does some of the squeezing for you. And there's also a part around your stomach, kind of like a cummerbund for a tuxedo. And that inflates and it squeezes your stomach. And so this A-tags just had more squeezing and more stomach squeezing. And in the centrifuge, you could sit there at 9 Gs. We used to say smoking a lucky, which meant, just taking a break. I did that program in an F-15. I got checked out in the Eagle, and it was all the test points. You just sit there at 7, 8, 9 Gs, and it was not a problem at all. But the problem in the Eagle has a centerline control stick. The F-16 has a side stick, but the F-15 had a center stick. And so when your legs blew up, they actually had a problem that they inflated so much that it would trap the stick. So you couldn't control the airplane, which was bad. So we were testing a new G suit that would let you do that.
Wow. Amazing. How did you go from the Air Force then to NASA?
So I just did a application. I was at test pilot school as a student, and it must have been 99. They said they're going to have a class of 2,000 for astronauts. And I went ahead and applied. Back then it was paper. So I had a big, thick stack of paper. Now it's all online. And it was the application process is a lot of hazing. Like my son's, anyway, like applying to medical school or whatever you want to apply to, those big kind of things is a lot. And while we were at test pilot school, everybody there wanted to be an astronaut, but some of my classmates were like, we're students, we don't have any experience. These other guys are whatever. So they didn't apply, and I did. And everybody was 100% sure that I wasn't going to get picked, because I was like the young student, younger than everybody. And I ended up getting selected. And I learned a big lesson. It wasn't because I was great or anything, but the lesson I learned was don't tell yourself no, because those other guys, unfortunately, they were smarter than me and they were better looking than me, but they never got picked because NASA had the Columbia accident. NASA hired way too many astronauts. They didn't need any for a while. And there just wasn't any more classes for a while. So that was an important career lesson that I learned applying to be an astronaut. Don't tell yourself no.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good lesson for life.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So you joined, was it 2000? Did you say you joined NASA?
Yeah. I was in the class in 2000. Yeah.
And what year did you first find out you were going to go to space?
Not till 2009.
Okay. Yeah.
So it was I think it was 9. It might've been 08 because we slipped a few months, but I think I learned in like January of 09, maybe something like that. And I eventually flew in February of 2010. So it was almost a decade. Everybody, the class of 98 and the class of 2000, I think everybody waited between 8 and 12 years was the kind of it was a long wait because like I said, they hired too many astronauts. The Columbia accident slowed things down. There was a problem on STS-93, some wire chafing. And then NASA decided that these space station construction missions, that's what we were doing back then, were so complicated that only experienced guys could fly. So they only flown astronauts for years. And so all those things conspired to make it a long wait, but it was worth the wait.
Yeah. At any point during that decade, did you think, maybe I should just go and do something else?
I wanted to fly in space. I mean, I was like intensely wanted that. But I never, there was a point. So we used to have to go around and we call them PRs, public relations. So you go to a school or go to a NASA center and just talk to people. And, the first question is, well, what's it like in space? Well, I don't know. I haven't flown yet. When are you going to fly? I don't know. And so it was like after about 5 or 6 years of doing that, I got to I was like, all right, I'm done. It's time. I need to fly in space. It was probably I think it was by the 8th year that I had enough being pretend astronaut. I wanted to go be a rower.
Yeah. And then it didn't come long after that. So then 2010.
Yeah.
Okay. So talk to me about that first time. So when you first hear you going to space, and I'd love to know a little bit about like the kind of a week leading up to the launch, like how different is that week? If it's very different at all to any other time.
That first flight was amazing. It was so awesome. I remember when I heard, we went home and had a big party for the family at home. And, because I had been waiting my whole life, and I'd been waiting 8 or 9 years at NASA by that point. Yeah. So that was the excitement was pretty awesome. And then the flight itself was, I thought I was ready for it because I'd spent my whole life watching IMAX movies and reading books and talking to other astronauts in the astronaut office. I'd been with these guys for a decade and I just wasn't ready for it. The first book I wrote was called View from Above. It's a National Geographic book. The whole first chapter is about that 8.5 minute ride into space, looking down and seeing I-95 on the East Coast of America, the highway that goes from New York to Baltimore up and down the coast. Wow. Hearing the sounds of those rocket engines when the solid rockets came off, that loud explosion, looking across the cockpit and seeing the moon off in the distance. Night turned to day when the rockets lit up because there was some clouds. And one of my favorite things to do is to Google STS-130 launch. So for your guests, just Google STS-130 launch and look at the videos. People put down their home movies back when they had handheld camcorders, and they're screaming and cheering. And it's really emotional to see how spaceflight affects, there were tens of thousands of people there watching my launch. It was pretty awesome.
Tens of thousands. That's amazing. Yeah, for
sure. If not hundreds. There was a lot of people. Wow. The shuttle, going to any launch is cool. These SpaceX rockets are cool, but they're so much smaller than the space shuttle. The space shuttle was amazing. That was a manly rocket. That was a 4 million pounds of weight, 7 million pounds of thrust. That was a pretty cool flying machine.
Yeah, I'd love to see a launch. That would be amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you should
yeah,
go
for
see
sure.
one.
Yeah, well, hopefully one day. Hopefully one day.
I was
Definitely.
just talking. Actually, I was doing an event with one of the UK MPs a few weeks ago, and he said they're bringing in an air launched rocket to the UK and uh, off to the west near Land's End, a town off to the west. Had a funny name for the town, but they're going to take off in an airplane and drop the rocket and have it launched. So it won't be like watching a space shuttle from a launch pad, but
Yeah.
they say it's going to be the first orbital launch from the UK, which would be cool.
Is it going to be Richard Branson doing that, Virgin? Because that's how his launched, didn't it? I think.
Virgin Galactic, the space tourist, has a big carrier airplane, and the rocket drops from it and takes off. He also has Virgin Orbit, which I think is a 747. It's a big airliner that has a rocket that same thing drops off the wing, but then it goes into orbit. So Virgin Orbit is more of a commercial. They're launching real satellites into space. Virgin Galactic is just a space tourist. They just go up and then come right back down a few minutes later.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. The week leading up to your first launch, or week leading up to any launch, is there much that's hugely different in terms of how you live your day-to-day life?
So the launch week is a big thing for NASA launches. And also when I launched with the Russians on a Soyuz, it's very programmed out. There's, every few minutes is scheduled, going through medical things, doing your last minute training, having some time with your family. That is very programmed. And I did take some time. Like I wrote letters for my family just in case. You don't want to dwell on stuff like that, but you want to make sure that, you take care of your business. Because, you never know. But it's a very regimented, scheduled thing. Watching the space tourists go up, I just heard today, I was doing some interviews about that. And, one of the people said, well, they just showed up yesterday. Like there was not a lot of training. Of course, there's nothing for them to do. There's literally no controls in the capsule for Blue Origin anyway.
Yeah.
It's like, how much training do you do when you take a 747 from London to New York? So it's kind of the same thing, what they're doing these days.
Yeah, absolutely. But there was a lot more when you were doing it. So your launch then, what would you say was more, made more of an impact on you, your first launch or your first re-entry?
The launch is incredible and everybody wants to talk about launch, but the reality is the re-entry is a lot more amazing. A lot of countries have launched rockets into space. Very few countries have brought them back to Earth. And as a test pilot, I was really interested in the re-entry because that's incredible. Seeing the plasma as it goes through for the shuttle, when you hit the air, it turns into a couple 1,000-degree plasma. And I was a pilot, so it was like an airliner. I had those kind of airline pilot windows, and you could see this orange and pink, red, glowing fire out the window.
Wow.
As it spilled over, it was kind of exploding. So we had some windows up here, and it was like a strobe light inside the cockpit because the plasma was just flashing right outside the window. It was crazy. It was like being remember in Alien, the movie Alien, when the lights were flashing and the spaceship was going to blow up? It felt like I was in that, a strobe light at a club. And the Soyuz had it was the same visually effects, red, green, or not green, orange and yellow plasma. And then in the shuttle, we landed like an airliner, and the shuttle only got up to about 1.5 Gs. It wasn't very many G forces. It was a long, slow descent. The Soyuz capsule comes a lot more directly back down in the atmosphere. And it was Mr. Toad's wild ride, as we say. When the drogue chute came out, the thing was tumbling. It seemed like for several minutes. That was a crazy ride back to Earth in the Soyuz. And then when it hits the ground, it hits the ground. I mean, it lands in the Kazakh steppe, and it's definitely no doubt that you've landed. In fact, I show a video when I do speaking engagements. I show a video of landing, and you hear this beep, this tone right before landing. So in debrief, it's pasadka, or landing. So it's the landing tone. There's a light that comes on that says that you've landed. And I said, you guys could save money. You could take that sensor off the capsule because you don't need to tell the crew that they've landed. There's no doubt that they've landed. It's like a car crash more than it is a landing.
Welcome to Earth. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a car crash. Exactly.
Wow. When you're going through and you're seeing these red, orange, yellow flames, this plasma, do you feel any change in temperature in where you are?
I wondered that. So when I was on my shuttle flight, I took my glove off and I put my hands up to the window and I couldn't feel anything.
Really?
It was warm, but it wasn't like, the oven or anything, which is crazy because it's a couple thousand degrees right outside. But the difference is there's not a lot of thermal inertia. So if you're in the UK, what's the temperature today? 20, 10,
probably
15?
A bit less. Yeah. Like 10, 15, 12, something like that. Yeah.
So for the Americans, it's in the 50s. So it's chilly outside, right? But if you took your jacket off and went outside, you'd be like, it's a cool day, and you go back inside. But if you jumped into 10-degree water, you would scream like a little girl because it would be so cold, right? Yeah. Because water has a lot more thermal inertia. Air doesn't have that much thermal energy. And the same thing when you're coming back to space, even though the temperature is really high, it's super thin air. So it will take a while for that heat to get inside the shuttle. So even though the heat shield gets super hot, but the windows on the top of the shuttle didn't get that hot.
Wow. That's interesting. Yeah, I was really wondering about that one. That's cool, though. I'm glad you had the same wondering.
Yeah, I was. Well, I actually tested it. And that was I don't know if that's a scientific thing, but that was my experience.
Yeah, no, it's scientific enough for me. It'll do. A couple of little kind of questions and things about like life on the ISS, just things that I've been wondering about and other bits and bobs. So when you go to bed at night and it's I'm guessing that's the quietest time of the day when most of the people have gone to their bed. What's like the background noise? Is it just like a whirring of machines and stuff, or is there anything else?
I used to love that. So I'm a night owl. I hate getting up in the morning, but I don't want to go to bed at night. I just stay up all night if I can. And my crewmate, Samantha Christopher, was kind of like that too. She's definitely a night owl. And our other crewmates were all morning people, which was actually really good because they would get up early and exercise, and then we would stay up late and I would take pictures. I ended up taking more pictures, I think, than anybody ever did in space. So at nighttime, she would run around and do the things that she needed to do for her European Space Agency work. And I would go around and take pictures and process them and send them down for the IMAX movie. We were filming an IMAX movie, but it was so cool to just turn the lights off and just float by yourself. I can hear it right now. It's fans, it's computers running. It's what you would think a spaceship would sound like at nighttime. And then when I went to bed, we had a laptop, just like I'm on a laptop right now. And I have my headsets. I would put my Bose headsets on, plug them into the laptop. And for about a month, I went to bed listening to the Interstellar soundtrack, the Hans Zimmer soundtrack.
Nice.
And one day I was floating through Node 3, or Node 1, actually, the central module of the station. And I heard this bird chirping, and I stopped and I looked down into Node 3. And my crewmate, Misha Kornienko, a Russian cosmonaut, was down there working out. I said, Misha, do you have a bird in there? And he laughed. The Russian cosmonaut, or the Russian psychologists, had sent their cosmonauts these MP3 files of sounds from Earth. And so they had a jungle, they had waves lapping on the shore, they had a cafe, just glass clanging, rain. It was amazing. And everybody on the crew fell in love. And so he gave everybody these files. And so I spent about a month listening to rain, the sounds from Earth. Yeah. And I didn't realize, none of us, I don't think, realized how amazing those sounds were. I mean, it was great to hear those sounds. And another interesting thing about that, while I was just sleeping with no music, I just dreamt of space. Like I remember just having like black dreams, or sometimes there'd be asteroids flying through space, kind of like in The Empire Strikes Back. And then that month that I was listening to rain, sounds from Earth, I dreamt of Earth. Like I still remember this green rolling hill with a house on it and blue skies. I just remember that sight. And so it was interesting that my brain suddenly was thinking of Earth when it heard Earth sounds, even though I was sound asleep.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, it's also amazing that you were having frequent like space dreams. That's so cool that you go to space and all of a sudden you transfer to space dreams. You're just dreaming of asteroids and stuff.
Because I knew I was in space. Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing though, isn't it? That is really cool. Tell me a little bit about the fun you had with like playing around with gravity. So like I heard you on a podcast or something talking about making like water balls and putting little like Alka-Seltzer or something tablets in them. Like just tell me about that. It sounds so fun.
My flight doc had given me like a Ziploc with some syringes and Alka-Seltzer tablets. And there's something about floating water that 100% of astronauts are mesmerized by.
I think it's all humans would be if we had the chance, right?
Because it's alien. I mean, we don't float on Earth. Even in the pool, you're not falling. What you're doing in space is falling. You're falling towards the center of the Earth. You're just going 8 kilometers a second this way, so that as you fall down at 10 meters per second, you move forward and it makes a circle. And if you're at the right speed, it's an orbit. So you're falling, and which you can't do on Earth for more than a few seconds. And so if you take a syringe and you slowly squirt out the water, really slowly, if you do it too fast, you'll get a pile of water droplets shooting across the station.
Yeah.
But if you do it slowly, it'll just grow into a ball. In fact, every once in a while, if somebody has a drink and you just leave it Velcroed to the wall, and if you forget to close off the straw, there's a little plastic clip on the straw. The water will slowly leak out of your drink bag, and you'll have this ball of water, or tea, or fruit drink, whatever. So if you're floating along and you see that, you're like, somebody forgot to close off their thing, and then you just have to go up and drink it, because if you disturb it, it'll turn into a cloud of drink that goes everywhere. Yeah. So I got some really cool Red Dragon, this Hollywood camera. It was I shot the first ultra high def video back in 2015. That was really cool. But I got some cool pictures with backlighting of this ball of water. On my first flight, I think Nick Patrick we were shooting M&Ms into a ball of water. So there's a ball of water, and if you do it slowly, the M&M just touches it and kind of does this. It just is attached to it by surface tension. The same reason bugs can land on a pond and not sink. It's surface tension. But if you throw it hard enough, it'll go into the center of the ball and float in the center. So that's endless fascination with that. Another really cool thing I did, Samantha actually had this clear plastic ball, and she was putting like candy and M&Ms and cough drops and whatever hard, small objects. And she'd shake it up and film it. And she has a friend who's a physics professor, and he was wanting to study how particles interact in weightlessness. So she was doing that. And then one day it was just sitting there, and I noticed that all the M&Ms were on one side of the ball, which didn't make sense to any of us. Actually, we were all looking at this going, what's happening here? We're in weightlessness. They should all be floating around, but they weren't. And so I shook it up, waited, came back, and sure enough, all the M&Ms had moved. Well, it turns out that the ball is actually in a little bit different orbit than the space station center of gravity, right? The station's center of gravity is here, and the ball's center of gravity was over here. And so, which means the particles in them want to move at a different velocity and different direction than the space station did. And it only takes a couple minutes for all those M&Ms to kind of get pegged to one side. So that was actually a really cool demonstration for physics professors or astronautical engineering professors to figure out, how the little nuances of orbital mechanics. Yeah. That was cool.
Yeah, that's super cool.
That was cool.
You're also an official space dentist now, right? Were you the first person ever? Is it the first person ever to change a filling in space?
That's what our NASA dentist told me. So one of my crewmates had a filling that fell out, so I had to put a new filling in, which was actually really cool. It was kind of funny. I called down, and it was on a weekend, and the NASA dentists weren't answering their cell phone, and we have a phone system. It's kind of like using WhatsApp or Viber or FaceTime to make a call. When we had the right satellite connection, we could do that. So I ended up calling my family dentist and she talked me through how to do a film on the weekend in space. So
Wow.
I was the crew medical officer, and I was also the crew dentist.
That's so cool. I love it.
Yeah, it was
And it
fun.
went well. It was okay. Yeah.
It went well, but it's kind of funny. NASA was using really old technology. So it's called Cavit. And she was like, what? You guys are using that? Like, we haven't used that since the 90s. But so I don't think it lasted forever, but it was a good temporary fix.
Yeah. Yeah. It did. It kept him okay while he was in space.
It did the job. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. And so were you up there for a Christmas as well? I just was really quickly wondering about what Christmas is like on the ISS as well. Again, just in a couple of minutes.
My first flight, we were there for the Olympics. My second flight, I was there for Thanksgiving, big American holiday. My birthday, everybody had a birthday while we were there. Christmas, New Year's, Russian Orthodox Christmas, Easter, St. Patrick's Day, Valentine's Day. It was basically every holiday. First day, opening day, we call it, for baseball season here in the States. So Christmas was fun in space. It's better on Earth.
Yeah.
So, you're not with your family. It was cool to be able to do it up there, but it's a lot better down here on Earth. But it was fun to do everything once, to celebrate. On New Year's, we were trying to see fireworks, but because you go around the Earth every 90 minutes, we were never over a big city at night.
Yeah.
At that time, we had, I guess, 16 New Year's or whatever going around 16 times a day. But we were never over the right place at the right time to see the fireworks.
Ah, that sucks. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you still got to be in space. So that's cool.
Right.
So yeah, at Christmas, are you ever allowed to have a little drop of alcohol on the space station, or is that like a total no-go? Like, what's the rules with that?
It was funny. So what I tell people, when I became commander of the space station, I had one rule, and that was no alcohol on the American segment. There's an American segment and a Russian segment.
Yeah.
And so then we all floated down to the Russian segment, but there's no
happy holidays.
Yeah. But the rule is no alcohol. I think that's the rule. Honestly, I don't know. I know there is a rule book. I don't know that it's not like anybody ever briefed us on those things. It was just, I guess, understood.
I guess they just expect you to, be responsible up there and, do your duty.
Well, there's never been any problem or anything like that.
Imagine waking up with a hangover in space and forgetting where you were last night. That would be terrible.
Where am I? Yeah, that would be really bad.
I feel like I'm spinning. Like, you look out the window.
Well, you don't need a hangover for that. I felt so. Your balance system, it's made of 3 parts. There's visual, right? Like you can look out and I know up, the ceiling's there and is down. So your eyes send a signal to your brain which way is up and down. There's something called somatosensory. So my butt can tell that the chair is down there because it feels force. And it sends a second signal to your brain which way is up and down. And then you have these semicircular canals right in your ears. There are 3 perpendicular axes, circles. And we have rate gyros in the shuttle and in the F-16 and in other airplanes that tell the vehicle if it's pitching or rolling or yawing. Our brains are designed the same exact way as the space shuttle is with those things. So you can close your eyes and you can tell if you're pitching or whatever based on these semicircular canals. But in space, they don't work very well because there's no gravity telling them where up and down is, and you don't have the up and down somatosensory. So I went probably 3 or 4 or 5 months where I would close my eyes and I was immediately pitching, yawing right, and rolling left. It felt like I was doing this. I can still, and then as soon as I open it up, that visual signal overrode the other 2 signals and it would stop it.
Did that come with nausea?
It didn't. It was kind of cool. And I remember doing video conferences with our doctors trying to describe it. And I was like, all right, doc, I'm normal. I'm sitting here normally. Okay, now I'm pitching forward and rolling left and now I'm back to normal, trying to explain what was happening. And it's just that part of your brain is confused.
Yeah. There's probably lots of little things that happen up there, right? Including the fact you stretch. You grew by what, 5 centimeters, I think?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was finally 6 feet. We had a tape measure. So I went up and I was just over 6 feet tall. Nice. But the doc said within, I think, a couple hours of getting back to Earth, you're back down. I was back down to 5'10". So
yeah. Oh, well, yeah, you know, you got 6 foot in space. So there you go. Were there any physical sensations with that, like pain or discomfort or anything like that?
On my first flight, I had a raging headache. It was terrible. And then on the morning of flight day 3, my third morning, and or I guess second wake up in space, all of a sudden I was fine. It was like a light switch went on. But as far as stretching, I didn't notice it on my first flight, but my second flight, I had terrible back pain. Like my back really hurt for several weeks. And they had this thing called Not a Chair, but it's like a camping thing made out of camping material, like what a tent is made out of. And you could wrap it around your knees and it would pull your knees up in to kind of scrunch you up into a ball. And that helped a lot. Every time I went in my crew quarters, that's where you have your own laptops. That's where you do email and study procedures and stuff. I would always get in that it was about 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden, and then my body got used to it. But I think it was just stretching the spine. A really weird thing I had on my first flight was like about, I don't know, a week in or so, one of my crewmates said, "Hey, Terry, tap your feet on the floor." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I tapped my feet and I was like, like electric shock. It felt like I just stuck my finger in the socket. And which, by the way, don't do that at home. That's not smart. But I had this shooting electrical pain through my body, and it was weird. And I remember I had these really hot, painful, like it felt like I'd ripped my muscle because you're moving around with your hands. And as a rookie, I wasn't very good. And I thought, man, I must've just pulled too hard or something. And what it turns out, when I got back, I talked to one of the doctors. I'm like, I'm a decade at NASA. I've never heard about this. And they said, "Oh yeah, so some people have it. It's because as you stretch and grow, your muscles and your nerves pull apart in different rates, I guess." And so my nerves just got pulled from my muscles by stretching, and that caused a lot of pain. I had that same problem on my second flight too. Where your body just stretched. And it was like that for months. I mean, it didn't really heal. When I got back to Earth, I was back to normal. I didn't have that problem. Although the doc told me that there was some guy that never got better. Like he felt like numb and had problems for, I don't know. He probably still has it to this day.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's rough. That sounds painful and unpleasant.
Yeah. It was not fun. Well, I was worried. The good news is it was just nerves, but the bad news is I thought I had like ripped a muscle. So I was really, tentative about working out and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Did NASA give you, like, is there a procedure in place or like a known thing to do for if you see something anomalous, a UAP or whatever it may be?
Right. So I got my book here, How to Astronaut. I wrote a chapter about that. No one ever gave us any, there's not procedures or there's no, hey, have the secret phone hotline back to whatever. I don't think anybody expects to see that. No one's seen it yet, but if it happened, there would definitely be some communication going back and forth down to Earth for sure.
Yeah, but there's not like a set, like, oh, you need to contact this guy at this number and
no.
X, Y, and Z. No, it's just, you're going to know to call somebody if you see something.
It's one of those things where, you're not sure in advance, but when it happens, it's time to make a phone call.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
No, I just wondered whether there might have been some, like kind of paperwork procedure or things set up, but no, that's interesting.
Not that I know of. I wrote another chapter I wrote in How to Astronaut was about what to do with the dead body. If your crewmate died, what would you do? And I don't remember ever getting any training about that. Apparently they have some body bags in space, and I read that in an article. Maybe I got the training and I was asleep that day, but I don't remember getting that training. Some other astronauts have said, they've been briefed on what to do if somebody dies. I just don't remember that from my training, but there's probably a lot of things I've forgotten during my training.
Yeah. So it's lucky that didn't happen while you were up there then, because
Yeah, it can happen to someone else just as long as it's not me.
I don't know where the body bags are. Yeah. So let's talk a bit about your podcast and some UAP stuff. So you started your podcast when? When did you? It wasn't long ago.
It's earlier this year. Yeah. I went to IKEA, got my desk that I'm sitting on, and the IKEA bookshelf, and set up this room. I've got a studio in my house that's nice. It's carpeted. I have pictures on the wall, so the sound is pretty good. Got some lights. I have some big studio lights in there. So I made this studio, and I think like yourself, I had done a blog in the past, and I've written some books, but rather than doing more of that, I just decided that podcast is the way to go. I was on Joe Rogan last year, and I like the way his format is kind of open-ended, and he has different guests on. Although he has a lot of MMA and stand-up comedians. That's kind of his go-to. But I just know a lot of people from a lot of different backgrounds. I mean, space, aviation, military, business, a lot of scientists, technical folks. I had a guy that has developed a malaria vaccine that was amazing. I've had a couple UAP guys on. I had a Washington Post best-selling author a few weeks ago, Craig Whitlock. We talked about Afghanistan. Guide Dogs for the Blind CEO. So it's been just completely whoever I have, and it's kind of an open-ended podcast, which is a lot of fun. They just have conversations. It's called Down to Earth with Terry Virts. And my goal is to talk about what matters down here on planet Earth. So
awesome. I'm going to put all the links to that in the description, by the way. So anybody listening, just scroll down and you'll be able to get to find Terry's podcast and some of his episodes and books and everything as well, all of it.
Awesome.
But let's talk a little bit about the two that that really interested me that you did with Christopher Mellon and Luis Elizondo. So how did that first, how did you get in touch with them? How did you decide I want to talk to them?
So I had met Chris Mellon a few years ago. I do guest lecturing at Harvard Business School a couple times a year. I teach a class called Why Organizations Fail, and we talk about the Columbia and the Challenger accidents at NASA. Which ironically, reading about Afghanistan, I felt like I was reading the Columbia accident investigation report. But I was teaching this class a few years ago, and one of the students came up and he was like, "Terry, we got to talk." And so kind of pulled me aside and was telling me all the stuff that Chris Mellon had been doing, and Lou. And so I got to talking to them. And for those who don't know, Chris was a former Undersecretary of Defense. He ran the Senate Intelligence Committee. He's a serious guy. He is not. He's not in the UFO club at all. He's the kind of guy that you would expect to be running the Senate Intelligence Committee or being an Undersecretary of Defense. He's that kind of guy, very intelligent. And Lou's more of like the military operative kind of guy, but he worked in the Pentagon for years. He's also a very serious guy. And they're the one. Chris actually is the one who helped break that New York Times story a few years ago where the video came out with the Navy pilot seeing that. There's a lot more data that hasn't been released that would be really interesting to see. But I had Chris on and I had Lou on. I had another guy named Paul Hynek, whose father had run Project Blue Book back in the 50s, famous Air Force UFO investigation. So I approach these from a scientific point of view. I never saw UFOs when I was in space, but I have an open mind. And when guys like Navy fighter pilots start getting videos of these really strange things that are doing stuff that airplanes can't do, it opened my eyes. And I wonder what's going on there. There was also that rock, Wameameya, whatever, I forgot what it was called.
Oumuamua, I think.
Oumuamua, something like that.
Yeah.
Came flying through the solar system from another star. It was traveling at interstellar velocity. So it wasn't something from our solar system. And then it accelerated and disappeared. And it was 11-to-1 length to width ratio. So it was oblong, which doesn't really happen in nature. So there was a lot of interesting things like, what was that thing that just came by?
Yeah.
And the standard answer when you talk to astronomers and physicists and stuff, the first answer is it's not an alien. Like if you ever see something weird, it's not an alien. You can find a normal explanation for it. So maybe there is for all this stuff, but there's certainly legitimate questions around some of this stuff. And then there's the crazy UFO crowd, so you have to kind of separate the wheat from the chaff. But it's interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So before I go a bit more into them, you said on a couple of different podcasts that I listened to you on, one was in your conversation with Luis Elizondo, actually. You said that you had a friend in the Pentagon who had an office next to the the Secretary of Defense. And he pulled you aside one day and told you a bunch of stuff. And you kind of indicated that your mind was blown and you were like, you didn't know what to make of it all. And I want to know what he said to you, or at least as much as you can are comfortable to share about what he said to
yeah,
you.
Well, that was the story I was just telling. So basically all the stuff that we've since seen with what Chris and Lou have said. I mean, I talked to them for hours. So if your listeners are interested, go to Down to Earth with Terry Virts and look at the Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo. I mean, I don't know if you've heard those episodes, but that was some crazy stuff.
Yeah,
it was. I don't know if this is PG rated or R rated podcast, but
you can go for it, man. It was fucking crazy.
It was, exactly. So, and I don't know, that's not me. That's just them talking. But again, the point I make, and going back to the Navy videos, but it's more than just those Navy videos. There's been reports globally and recently, and the kind of people that are reporting this are the kind of people, when they wake up in the morning, their goal for the day is to not see a UFO. Yeah. Like as a fighter pilot, I don't want to go knock on the colonel's desk and say, "Sir, I just saw a UFO." And the colonel sure doesn't want to go tell the general, "Hey, sir, my pilots are seeing UFOs." These guys don't want to see this. So for them to be reporting it, it's interesting culturally too. They brought up the point that the Air Force pilots have privately said, "Yeah, we saw some stuff," but none of them have come out publicly. But the Navy guys have been more willing to share what they've seen. And so there's probably a better culture there in the Navy of being open, whereas the Air Force is a little bit more, straight. Don't be that guy. But culturally, for these guys to come forward, this is not normal. And it's lots of folks. And, it wasn't just pilots. It was the radar operators on the Navy destroyers have seen stuff. And so it would be really cool to be able to get that actual data and see what it is. Cause there's videos and radar tracking information that we don't have public. That would be fun to see that.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of data that we're not able to have access to. Like on your conversation with Lou, Luis Elizondo, he said that he said it in quite a few conversations now, I think. It's just something he doesn't shy away from, although he's always very careful with how he says it. He said he believes that the US government is in possession of very exotic material, or extremely exotic material, I think was the quote he said on your podcast.
So you're talking about physical things, not just radar tracking data, or not just imagery. Yeah.
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 When he said that, like, how did did your head explode?
Well, it's a podcast. I'll let my guests, say what they want to say to a certain extent. I don't want to get canceled. But I have had to edit out a few things, but almost nothing. But you just take it for what it is. I mean, I have no reason not to trust Lou Elizondo. Yeah. And it's interesting. I don't know. I never, Area 51, everybody talks about Area 51. You go on Google Maps and see it. And when I used to fly at Red Flag, we called it the container because we weren't allowed to say box in the Air Force, but you're not allowed to fly in this big piece of airspace. And everybody talks about Area 51. I want to see Area 52. That's the one no one talks about.
I want to see S4 as well. Site 4. There's loads of little like sub places around there, I think, aren't there? I mean, Area 51 wasn't officially, I think, confirmed until like 2013 or something, was it?
I didn't even know if it was officially confirmed. I just know as an F-16 pilot, they said don't fly in there, and I actually made a mistake one day. I was at Red Flag flying with my wingman. We're flying along. And back then you had a display, but it was kind of crude and you have to type in coordinates and you could draw boxes and circles and stick figures, but they were just, you had to type in the coordinates. And we're flying, we're trying to hide from the MiGs, the bad guys. And this is in training. And all of a sudden there's all these giant divots. And I remember going, I'm looking at my map. I don't see any divots. Where did all this come from? This is weird. And then all of a sudden on guard, the emergency channel, they start yelling, spooky flight, head south immediately. And I was like, so we turned and I knew immediately that I flew into this area that I wasn't supposed to fly in. It was the old nuclear testing ground from the 50s. So there's all these huge craters from nuclear bombs.
Wow.
It was great. We were safe. The bad guys couldn't get to us, but that was, not not what we wanted to do. In fact, I just went to a funeral for one of my squadron mates, unfortunately, but we were telling stories, smoking cigars and drinking whiskey and telling stories from the 90s. And my boss at the time was like, yeah, Flanders, remember that time we had to go stand in front of the colonel and you were making comments like you need to get going, you don't have time. And I was like, shut up, we're getting in trouble. So we were telling that story about the time I got in trouble at Red Flag.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Have you ever met David Fravor? The guy from the Nimitz?
Yeah, he's the Navy pilot that filmed these videos that we've all seen. I have not. I'd like to meet him. He seems like a great guy. He seems like a fighter pilot. I know 100 guys just like him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the face of it, not to generalize, but you seem, you kind of similar vibe, right? Like you've had a similar-ish background. Obviously, I don't think he's been to space or anything, but that military, regimented, high-speed, technical, data, very data-based, all that kind of thing. And he definitely didn't seem like somebody that's, that was kind of particularly, I don't know, if that hadn't happened to him, I don't think he ever would have been into this subject at all.
Of course not. Yeah, of course not. Honestly, if that video hadn't come out, I wouldn't have UFO guys on my podcast.
To be fair, it was that video and the New York Times story with Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kane that kind of dragged me in as well. I think all my life I was a little bit, I'm interested in the topic, but never so much that I would kind of spend my time researching it and that kind of thing. But this grabbed me. It
did. Absolutely. Because it's data. It's not just the UFO Society or whatever.
And it's like multiple different data sets, isn't it, from that same event, plus multiple witnesses from the same event. Like it's David Fravor, Alex Dietrich. There's, like you said, some of the people that were behind the cameras and on the ship and everything like that, the aircraft carrier.
There were several people. There's some backseaters too. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's the infrared camera, which other these cameras more than me and the sensors and stuff, but like 3, I think, different types of hard data there. Yeah.
Well, the infrared camera, I was talking about Lantern earlier, and the targeting pod and the night flying, that's the same view. So that view that you see on the UFO, that's what it looks like way back in the day when we were flying Lantern. And the modern targeting pods are the same. They're just higher quality.
Yeah. Okay. So look, you've spoken to Chris, you've spoken to Lou, you have your doubts, you have your interests, you have, I'm sure lots of other people that you've spoken to, not on the podcast. And I know when people ask Lou, like you probably asked Lou, like, what do you think it is? He's always very careful to say, like, I know more than, I can say, and I don't want to have a guess because I don't have all the data. But are you comfortable to speculate a little bit? And have you kind of thought to yourself about what you think? If we just kind of focus on the Nimitz, for example, because there's so many others, right? There's so many others, and there's a good chance some of them are different things. But if we focus on the Nimitz, have you speculated at all what you think like that was?
Well, speaking about different things, it was interesting talking to Lou and also Chris. They kind of verified, I think there's 3 basic types of vehicles that have been sighted. There's the Tic Tac, the cylinder, there's a big triangle, and I think there's a square. There's like 3 different shapes.
And the classic saucer as well. I think that's in the Tic Tac category, I think, isn't it? But
yeah, it was something like that. Yeah. So I'm not like categorizing them, but there does seem to be a couple of common sightings. People in Belgium, people in Guam, people in the Northwest are seeing similar vehicles in different places. So I don't know, there's planets, they're so far away. A light year is a long way. I think it would take the Voyager probe, I think it would be 70,000 years just to get to Proxima Centauri, the nearest star to Earth. And that's, you couldn't even put one person in there, much less a society.
Yeah.
And that's thousands of generations just to get to the nearest star.
Incomprehensible.
And how do you know?
Yeah.
There's a science fiction book called The Three-Body Problem by Cixin Liu, a Chinese science fiction author. It's a great book. And they talk about the problem of getting signals to Proxima Centauri. So it takes 4 years to get there, but the stars are so bright next to our planets that they completely overwhelm any signal. We're sending out Star Trek, William Shatner just flew in space. We've been sending that out for 50 years, but aliens are never going to watch that show because the sun is infinitely brighter than whatever TV transmitter we have. So that's a big problem to know where to go.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, life, I always talk about, I'm a Christian, but not from a religious point of view, from a scientific point of view. I don't think life can happen on its own. It's just so complicated. For one single cell amoeba to be formed, there's millions, if not trillions of molecules all have to align to have all the different organs inside of a cell. And I mean, life is so complicated. I don't think it would happen unless somebody at least gets it started.
Yeah.
So all that being said, what could these things be? They could be Chinese or Russian. I hope not. I really hope not. And I don't think so. Chris Mellon actually had an interesting premise that maybe it's a drone, like if a society, we've been sending probes out into space for 50 plus years. So like in Star Wars, if you remember in The Empire Strikes Back, when Luke's on that ice moon, they had that the Empire was sending out drones to search and try and find Luke Skywalker. So, maybe could other civilizations send out drones and just see what's out there? That's possible. I don't know. I'm not saying it is, but that was an interesting premise. I hadn't heard that before. He thought that you could scour the galaxy, every star in the galaxy, in 1 million years if you could go 0.1% or 0.1 the speed of light. So if you could build a really fast advanced rocket that went 0.1 the speed of light, it would take thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years, but you could search the entire galaxy.
Yeah.
So maybe they're there. Joe Rogan's hypothesis is we started building nuclear bombs and then the aliens are like, what's going on? They came to check us out. I'm not agreeing with any of these hypotheses. It's just what other people have said.
No, we're speculating. But the nuclear thing, I mean, I'm not going to say, oh yeah, definitely 100%, but I do think that there could be something to that. I mean, there's a lot of different people that talk about a connection there, and like Robert Salas, who I think was the guy in charge of the nukes in America, he's talks about it a lot. But even Lou Elizondo, I think, has kind of not shied away from it. I mean, he's careful to not go into detail, but he's like, yeah, I think there's a lot of, smoke and things like that.
Well, all these sightings started happening right after the nuclear age began, which is interesting.
Yeah. And if there is something watching us out there that maybe has some interest in us, makes sense, I guess, on a level, right? That when we start firing off nukes left, right, and center and messing around with all that it's kind of like a kid's got his dad's gun, and they're like, we need to rein
it's not a threat, right?
Yeah.
Well, here's the other thing. People talk about Roswell, New Mexico, and I always make the joke.
Like, I was going to ask you about it.
If I'm going to go through all the hassle, we used to fly Roswell all the time. They have this instrument approach called the Widowmaker that you have fly as a pilot, and instrument approaches are a big thing that we practice for training and as students and just on a daily basis. And the one at Roswell is crazy. It's ridiculous. It's super hard. And I think they made that way to attract Air Force students to come there because then they land and they buy gas and they buy barbecue or whatever. So they made a really hard Widowmaker approach. So I've been to Roswell a bunch. And if I was an alien, I went through all the trouble to fly across the galaxy. I would probably go to the Bahamas or maybe Switzerland or Norway, or, I don't know that Roswell would be the place I went. But the Trinity site is there in New Mexico. Our very first nuclear weapon was exploded in New Mexico. So if Rogan's right, then that's a data point in his corner.
Yeah. And that was, there was a lot of nuclear atomic stuff going on around there, wasn't there? There's a few different, I think, Army installations there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and in terms of the traveling these astronomical distances of, Proxima Centauri 4 light years, but in terms of traveling, if it's hundreds of light years or whatever, my counterpoint to that in my head is like, it's like I can't even comprehend that distance. But imagine if there's a civilization or a non-human intelligence out there that's, say, even as little as 2,000 years ahead of us. And on a cosmic scale, 2,000 years, it's got to be nothing, right?
It's a blip,
So, but imagine where we would be if we don't wipe ourselves out and we don't destroy our planet before then. Imagine where we could be, technologically speaking. I mean, it would surprise me if we weren't going into other solar systems, to be honest.
That's a good point. I remember one day on the space station, I was flying over the South Pacific, and it was orbital noon, which means the sun was right overhead, right as I went over Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, the big island. And all of a sudden, the sun reflected off hundreds of rivers coming out of the mountains. It was incredible. And I remember, I had grabbed a camera. It's one of the coolest pictures I took in space. And I remember thinking, man, I'm flying over New Guinea. I mean, this is like, people are living in huts there. They've never had technology. I wonder what they would think if they knew there was an astronaut in space taking a picture of them, and it just made me think how far technology's come in the last couple hundred years.
Yeah.
And so you're right. 1,000 years from now, 2,000 years from now, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, even when we look at, the last 100 and so, like, when was the first flight? It was
1903.
Yeah. 1903. So 118 years ago. So 120 years ago, we hadn't even put anything in the sky, and now we've got people all the time sitting on the ISS, and we're kind of planning to go to Mars in the next few years, get back on the moon in the next few years, and it's a lot, isn't it? And if it continued to increase exponentially like that, because it's not a straight line by any means, it's like a half pipe. So yeah. Right. I mean, I love speculating about this topic. Did you ever look into Roswell properly, like in detail? Have you ever looked into that?
I went, had Mexican food, and saw the green aliens. We had one of those blow up green aliens on the space station. People say, "Did you see aliens?" I'm like, "Yeah, I saw one every day." It was one of those, green blow up things. I haven't looked into it. I've seen the documentaries and talked to folks, and there was there was a police officer that saw something crash there. And I don't know. I've always been super skeptical of that, so unless I saw the data, I would be hesitant about, believing it. But there are some credible stories. So I don't know.
Yeah. I think the key thing with Roswell is whichever side you sit on, I think it's just hard to believe anything when the fact that they've changed the story so many times, and the fact there's so many different people saying like, no, this definitely happened, and somebody saying no, it was a balloon, and no, I saw this, and it's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, and in this world of fake news, and this is a serious problem on Earth, aliens or not. People don't know what to believe. Like, there's so much misinformation about the vaccine, or the election was stolen, or, and when you don't have basic trust in basic things, that's not healthy. That's not a society that's going to progress and do great things. So we really need to figure out, you have to have a healthy level of skepticism. When I was doing my Afghanistan podcast with Craig Whitlock, there's so many bad things about what has happened in the Middle East for the last 20 years, Afghanistan and Iraq and we didn't learn a lesson from Vietnam. But I think the worst thing is that you can't trust the military, because when they bomb an innocent civilian by accident and they come out and they say, no, that was a terrorist, and then a journalist goes and films it, and then they're like, oh yeah, you're right, it was a civilian. How can you ever trust what they're saying? unless there's a journalist there verifying it, right? And it's that lack of trust is a real problem. And to your point about UFOs, there's so many people are saying this and that, and what can you trust? And so that's a great point.
Yeah, and you're right that it's a major problem in terms of life here on Earth. And I don't know how we're going to get out of that one, because to be honest, right now, no matter who says something on TV or in the media or politicians, I don't take anything at face value anymore. It's just so, you don't know what's the fake news and what's not anymore. It's
data.
Yeah.
My Twitter feed, it's different now, but about a couple years ago, I changed it. It said, in God I trust, everybody else has to bring data. And so my point was, my real point was, I'm not going to be ideological or, whatever. I just want to look at the facts and look at things dispassionately. But when you can see facts, then you can trust it. But if you're just listening to somebody say something, you should be a little bit skeptical. And why are you saying that? And what do you have to back it up? It's basic wisdom and discernment that we need, I think.
Yeah. Do your own research kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Trust, but verify.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say, like on the Nimitz, we have some data. We don't have all of it, but we have some data.
Right.
And from everything Chris and Lou said, it seems unlikely to be Chinese or Russian. It seems unlikely to be Black Project, but obviously it could be like the blackest of black of secrets that they've been told is like non-existent. But I don't think it's weather.
If you're so good at making that kind of technology, you wouldn't just go fly it around in a circle in front of Navy guys.
No, 100%.
I mean, you would do that for a reason, or off the East Coast of America or whatever. You just wouldn't be that careless. But when it comes to conspiracies, one of the reasons I kind of lean on I don't think the government knows that much, because the government just isn't that good. I spent 30 years at NASA and the Air Force. And so Bill Clinton wasn't able to cover up Monica Lewinsky, right? So how can tens or hundreds of thousands of people keep their mouth shut for 70 years, right? That's what I tell people about the moon landing. Like, NASA was not able to cover that up for 50 years. Of course, it would be a lot easier to land on the moon than to cover up something like that.
Yeah.
So that, especially
it's
in
a
this
good
age,
point.
Stuff comes out, right? Stuff comes out, and it's hard to keep anything a secret. Especially for decades and decades and decades. And although everybody thinks that, the U.S. government can do everything and they're perfect and they have all these great things, I worked there for 30 years, and there are definitely some good people there, but at the end of the day, it's the government. And so I am skeptical about their ability to hide stuff for that long, but maybe they are. Maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, two things on that. I would say on one hand, we could say that they haven't actually kept a secret, because you could say a lot of people have come out and told the truth about it. But then on the other hand, I personally think that how it probably works in the government, I think it's probably just so beyond compartmentalized. And so I think there'll be presidents that wouldn't have known loads of stuff. And I think there'll be, top people in top positions that don't know something, whereas somebody else knows it. And, I think nobody really knows who knows and who knows what. And it's all in all these different places. So I think I don't trust the government. But even if I did, if they said, oh, we don't really know anything, I could kind of believe it, that it's so badly organized, and that this guy over here and that lady over there. And
Well, did you see President Obama? Somebody interviewed him with that question, and he was like, "Yeah, did you get the briefing? Do they tell all the presidents about the aliens?" And I forgot exactly what he said, but his point was, I got the feeling there was stuff I didn't know, because there's so many different levels of compartmentalization. Yeah, it was interesting to hear him talking about that.
Yeah, I also was interested to hear him on a recent interview where he was asked about, like, what are the aliens or something like that. Some question that was just designed to be a bit, and in classic Obama style, he kind of had a bit of a laugh about it and like kept it cool. But then he kind of got serious, and you felt his voice change. And he goes, "No, but for real, there is stuff flying around up there, and we don't know what it is." And then he kind of said a few more words and kind of left it there. But he's always done that jokey kind of play it cool, like, if I told you that, but but it's the first time I'd seen him then change his tone and go like, no, but they are there. And
some presidents have to keep secrets. And, Jimmy Carter got hammered for a lot of things, and he lost the election in 1980. And one of them was he canceled the B-1 program, our bomber. And Reagan went after him. You're not being tough on the Soviets. You canceled the B-1 program. And he just came up with some lame excuse. Well, the real reason was he started the B-2 program, the stealth bomber, but he couldn't say it out loud. So, some presidents know stuff that they keep secrets on. Hopefully, the one we just had doesn't like to keep. He likes to brag about what he knows. So we'll. Anyway, it's an interesting. It would be really cool to get the briefing that the presidents get. Yeah,
no, 100%. If they even get it, like we said, if they even get that briefing, because a lot of them come out and say, I tried, I asked, I begged, and they say, no, you don't need to know. And so hopefully that comes out, and hopefully soon, so that we can kind of do this again and talk about it.
Exactly.
That would be fun. But look, I don't want to take much more of your time, Terry. I feel you've already given me quite a lot, and I know you've got loads of stuff lined up today with interviews and stuff. One last little thing I'll ask you is, no pressure here, but I am going to put you on the spot a little bit. If you've got any kind of message or anything, it doesn't have to be overly sentimental, inspirational, or anything. It can be whatever you want. Just a few words that you want to pass to anybody watching or listening today.
Well, the one thing I love to tell people is don't tell yourself no. I think we talked about that already. But the kind of my mission in life is I've had a feeling for the last 3, 4, 5 years that it kind of feels like the 1920s and 1940s, not that far away. Democracy has been a mess, and we need to figure out how to get that right, because the Chinese government is very efficient. And they're not the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was kind of a mess. I think the Chinese government's a lot more better organized, if you will, and they're spreading. George Orwell would not have dreamed up the way that they're running their government, right? The level of authoritarianism and just state-sponsored, controlled every life. And if that's the way we want human society to be, it's going to be a pretty miserable earth in the future. So we need to figure out how to get democracy right. And I could talk for hours about that, but that's kind of in my mind. Yeah. And energy is important. I'm working in the energy industry now. I have a renewable diesel company.
Endeavor, right? I wanted to ask you about it.
Yeah. Endeavor Renewable Energy. It's a startup. We're still getting started up, but we want to make renewable diesel. And I'm working for another energy company called NOV, helping them with their energy transition technologies. So climate change is important. But to your point, the Earth's been around for 1 billion years. It's going to be around for billions of years. The climate change is going to end within a few centuries. We're not making any more dinosaurs, right? So climate change is going to end, and we'll get back to life on Earth. But species loss is forever, and unless we can get democracy working right, life will be pretty miserable for folks in the future. So that's kind of my passion is how do we solve those problems?
Yeah, no, that's really important. I really agree. And I think we have a lot of work to do at home, like not in the US, but also in the UK and Europe. I think there's still a lot that needs to be done to make it more democratic, to be honest. And more in the interest of humanity as a civilization, in terms of things like looking after the planet, which is they like to talk about it, but it's never actually at the top of anybody's real list, is it? That's in power and able to do something about it. But yeah, agree wholeheartedly. Great message, and I really enjoyed this today, Terry. This was a lot of fun. I could have talked to you for hours, but like I say, I got to let you go. All the links for your books and other episodes of your podcast and all that kind of thing, and I'll put my link to my chat with Scott Parazinski, your fellow astronaut. I'll put that down there as well, and just any other relevant links that we've mentioned during this conversation. Scroll down and you can find them. Thank you, Terry.
Amazing. Thanks for having me on.
Have a good one.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Terry Virts. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out the array of links in the description, and please subscribe to both this podcast and Terry's. Be nice, be happy, be cool.